All right, let's dive right into the world of financial machine learning. We're going to explore a single idea that's, well, it's pretty counterintuitive, and it's flipping decades of statistical wisdom completely on its head. This is all about prediction, complexity, and a paradox that could totally change how we forecast financial markets.
So, let's just start with a pretty radical question. For generations, the golden rule in statistics and finance has always been simpler is better. But what if that's not just a little bit wrong? What if it's the exact opposite of what we should be doing to get the best predictions?
To really wrap our heads around this new idea, we've got to first look at the old rules. For decades, financial modeling was really dominated by one very powerful philosophy.
And at the heart of that old way of thinking was something called the principle of parsimony. The idea was basically that a good model should be elegant and lean. Use the fewest possible parts to explain the data. Anything more complex was seen as dangerous, a surefire way to overfit, where your model gets fooled by random noise and just completely fails in the real world. But there's a huge catch, and the statistician Leo Brayman pointed this out. A simple model might explain itself perfectly, but what if that model is just a really poor imitation of reality? The financial world isn't simple. It is incredibly messy. So your clean, elegant model might look great on paper, but it could be fundamentally wrong about how things actually work out there. And that brings us to the modern challenge, the thing that really shattered the old rules, an absolute tsunami of data.
Just look at this comparison. The game has totally changed. We went from analyzing maybe a few dozen data points to hundreds, even thousands. We're pulling in everything now, from news articles to satellite imagery. Those simple, straight-line relationships that the old models loved, they just can't keep up with the tangled, hidden connections in this new ocean of data.
So how do you navigate this new world? Well, you need a completely new playbook, and that's where machine learning comes in, because it approaches the whole problem of prediction from a completely different angle.
This slide really gets to the heart of the shift in thinking. The old way, that was all about hypothesis testing. You'd start with a theory, build a simple model, and ask, is my theory right? The machine learning culture, it has a much more direct goal. Get the most accurate prediction possible, full stop. The question changes from, is my theory correct, to, what is the absolute best forecast I can make with all this data?
Of course, having all this flexibility creates a huge risk of that overfitting problem we talked about. And that's where a really crucial tool called regularization comes in. Think of it like safety rails for your super complex model. It's a set of techniques that basically penalizes excessive complexity, stopping the model from just memorizing random noise. You're trying to find that Goldilocks sweet spot, a model complex enough to find real patterns, but disciplined enough so it actually works on new data.
And this is where we get to the central paradox. Armed with these new tools, researchers started pushing complexity to its absolute limits, and they discovered something that just defied everything they thought they knew.
Right, this is the question everyone asks, and for good reason. According to that old principle of parsimony, a gigantic model with thousands of parameters should be a complete recipe for disaster, right?
And you know what? At first, that's exactly what happens. As you start making a model more and more complex, its performance on new data actually gets worse. It hits what we can call the danger zone of overfitting. But, and this is the absolutely incredible part, researchers didn't stop there. They kept going. They made their models even bigger, pushing them past this danger zone into territory that everyone assumed was totally off limits.
And this chart shows the stunning result, a phenomenon they call double ascent. As you can see, performance is decent with simple models, then it tanks in that danger zone. But then, as you push into the hyper-complex region where you have way more parameters than you have data points, performance doesn't just recover, it skyrockets. It becomes better than ever before.
So the takeaway here is just mind-bending. Bigger really can be better. It seems that when these models become overwhelmingly complex, they kind of stop trying to find one perfect answer, and instead find this sort of stable, averaged-out solution that's surprisingly robust. It's like a form of natural self-regularization that turns that old principle of parsimony completely on its head.
Now, this isn't just some cool academic theory. This discovery has tangible, real-world consequences for pretty much anyone involved in the economy.
To put this all into perspective, let's look at a benchmark. The Sharpe ratio is a common way to measure risk-adjusted return. Basically, how much reward you're getting for the amount of risk you take. A ratio over 1 is considered pretty good. Well, back in 2015, a really impressive study managed to hit a ratio of 1.72 with a fairly simple model. That was a high bar to clear, but these new hypercomplex models, they're now surpassing it.
So why does beating that benchmark even matter? Well, because better predictions lead to smarter decisions, plain and simple. We're talking more effective investment strategies for all of us, more accurate risk maps for the entire economy, and a brand new way to uncover these subtle economic relationships we never even knew existed. So it's not just about forecasting, it's a new tool for discovery.
Now, a really crucial warning here. This is not a license to just throw random junk into a model and hope for the best. As the researchers themselves emphasize, the key is to use these rich, complex models thoughtfully, and they must always be paired with that prudent regularization, that shrinkage technique we talked about, to keep them stable and reliable. So we end on this thought. This crazy paradox was discovered in finance, which is one of the messiest, most difficult to predict fields there is. If the bigger is better principle works here, of all places, where else might it apply? From medical diagnoses to climate modeling, this radical new understanding of complexity could be about to change, well, everything.